The Life of Chuck is the latest film directed by Mike Flanagan. Now, I think at this point, most people recognize him from his original miniseries on Netflix. He has like 5 at this point, and they're all pretty solid. But his roots are definitely within horror, and especially adapting Stephen King. This has to be like his 3rd or 4th property at this point that he has adapted. But this film, however, is not really a horror film, despite it being adapted from a Stephen King story. It stars Tom Hiddleston as the title character, and pretty much just documents his life, which isn't much of a plot synopsis, but part of the trick of this film is you're never quite sure what you're watching until you get into the 2nd and 3rd act. All I will say is that this film starts with Act 3, meaning the beginning of this movie is the end of the story, and it has a non-linear structure. And I will say, I do think this movie benefits from that structure, because without that magic trick, I don't know if the film would fully work. Part of it is trying to discover what is happening, picking up on clues, trying to fill in the gaps. However, the downside to it is I think I was most attached to this beginning act. When this movie starts, there is much destruction around the world. It is collapsing, falling apart, very similar to things that are happening in our current world, and you're just watching these characters try to make sense of it, try to understand it, and it's very depressing. And in all honesty, I think that's what I related to the most, because at least in this current state of the world that we're in and all the things going on in it, that's very similar to how I am feeling at times. The issue, though, is that the movie doesn't really care to explore it beyond the 1st act, and it kind of brushes past because we have to get to a different type of story, and that story is surrounding a single man. And so I really think your opinion on this film is going to determine what type of movie you are wanting to see, because this is a movie that is very optimistic. Essentially, at the end of the story, we learn that Chuck is a person that just wants to dance throughout all the chaos in the world around him. And so I think this is one of those moments where my opinion on the film is more shaped around my own worldview and less about the film itself, and I just don't know if I'm in the headspace to accept that sort of reality at the moment. Because rather than exploring these deeper themes about the world collapsing around us, it more uses that as a plot point to help the character arc of Chuck himself. And I do think there are people that are going to see this movie and feel optimistic because of it. It's certainly inspirational. The score is very upbeat, there's a lot of bright lighting, and it definitely wants you to walk away with a positive message. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to love your life. And I'm not saying I disagree with that sentiment, but I think part of what this film might have accidentally communicated is that in order to do that, you do need to ignore the stuff around you. And so I am really curious to hear other people's opinions, especially surrounding the non-linear structure, because due to that, there isn't really a single protagonist. And yes, the film is titled Chuck, so it technically is him, but part of that disconnect is that there are different actors playing him, and because it is working backwards, we end on a different actor that isn't Tom Hiddleston. The other issue I had with it in the filmmaking decision was the use of a narrator who is voiced by Nick Offerman, and what this narrator does is pretty much just explain to you the entire movie. And I don't inherently have an issue with narration in film, although I do think it can be a cheap shortcut for not showing you what is happening, and I do wonder if this might come from Mike Flanagan working too close with Netflix over the past few years, because it's been pretty well documented that when screenwriters write shows or movies for Netflix, they write it in a way where they assume people's eyes aren't going to be on the screen at all times. So rather than a character just walking in the room and picking up an item, they also need to be talking out loud, explaining what they're doing. And I think this movie kind of did the same thing, where we can clearly see a character in an emotional act, but rather than just experience it and trusting the audience that they understand what the character is trying to communicate, the narrator is making it very clear what that character is thinking, feeling, and going to do next. And I'm sure part of that comes with the complex nature of trying to adapt a written story, and that's why I say I'm not asking for no narrator whatsoever. I just think in this specific film, it was a bit over the top. But overall, I did have an enjoyable time with this film, and most of the issues that I have come from a place of it being so unique and creative. And so while my critiques mostly come from the filmmaking decisions, I'm at least glad that these decisions were unique and creative and novel enough. So those are some of my thoughts on The Life of Chuck, but I would love to hear your thoughts if you've seen the film. So please comment below, let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.